We are back. There is always something cool that happens every single day, and we'll do our best to highlight those. You know, you can always feel free to tell us the stuff that we forgot, too, because we're going to try to capture it all, but sometimes we miss a few things. We're only human. Remember that. Speaking of being only human, I've got a couple of great ones on the line with me. I've got Shane Lewis. Is it Lewis or Louis?
Lewis, you got it.
Lewis from Rerez TV, a fantastic YouTube channel. I've been very impressed with the work that this guy has been doing for a very long time. I was lucky enough to be on his show not too long ago, and we've had some good chats over the last couple of years. But terrific to have Shane Lewis, Rerez TV, with us. And my old friend Sid Bolton, who runs the PC Museum in Brantford, Ontario, which I have never been to, but Steve Tilley and Shane and Scott Jones and Sean Hatton, and I'm sure, has Marissa been out there too? Sid?
Not yet. I'm still working on Marissa.
Okay, well, lots of my peeps, lots of my family, my EPN family has been out there. I can't wait to get out there. I will get out there at one point. But I wanted to have you guys. I couldn't think of. Well, I got to be honest. There's lots of people I could have talked to about the N64 because there's a lot of love. But I thought you two guys would be a hell of a lot of fun because Shane, you do a lot of dissection into weird consoles and failed consoles and bad consoles and weird ideas. Let's talk with you first here. What are your thoughts about the Nintendo 64?
You know, I really loved the Nintendo 64 when it came out. I remember playing it at some event. The only time I ever got to play a console early before it came out, and it blew my mind. Mario was in 3D, and suddenly the world was different for me. And I had played 3D games previous to that, but never on a console. I just didn't think they really could do that kind of graphic support, like walking around. I remember seeing Star Fox and thinking, well, they must have just taken the Star Fox cartridge and made a game console out of it, because I didn't know any better when I was a kid.
Yep.
I know that the system doesn't have the best library in the world, but there's enough games on there that I think are really good that make it a console to remember, at least.
I have a little bit of that library with me, and Sid, we're going to play a little Wave Race. This is one of my favorite games of that era, and it was a launch title with the N64. But Sid, you have a massive collection of everything, but you can speak to the size of the N64 library. How many games actually came out for this machine?
Actually, just under 300 in North America. I'm not sure what it is worldwide, but about 298 titles in North America. So really not a lot. You mentioned Wave Race, Vic. I wonder if you remember, I'm going to sidetrack us a little bit here. I don't know how well you can see this, but
yeah.
Do you remember this Wave Race cartridge?
Oh my God, I signed that one.
Cartridge? Yeah, so actually the first time I met you in person, you and Scott, I had you autograph my copy of Wave Race 64. It's factory shrink wrapped, and I like how Scott puts, holy crap, I can't believe I'm actually writing on this.
That's awesome.
And you gave it a 10 out of 10, of course.
I gave it a 10 on the show, and I haven't played it in a long time, so I want to play it today, and I'm actually a little nervous of checking it out again because I know in rose-colored glasses in the rear view it's better. But what do you think? And I'll start with Sid this time. What do you think it is about the N64 software that makes it a special machine? And tell me a couple of the games that you think really signify the success for Nintendo with this platform.
Well, I think one of the biggest things about it was the transition to 3D, and it wasn't just Nintendo that was doing that. It was the entire video game industry moving into 3D and not really knowing how to move characters around, how to deal with a camera, things like that. And Nintendo definitely showed how good they are at making games in general by what they did with Super Mario, of course, and of course we can't forget about, for me up until recently, the recent Zelda, we can't forget about Ocarina of Time. So this is actually have the collector's edition here. This game changed me. It changed how I felt about video games, how much time I spent playing games, and it was one of those things where it's probably one of the first games I kept thinking about when I wasn't actually actually sitting at the console. So, you know, that's the kind of game that you know, you want to go back and play again. And so, if we do end up getting an N64 Classic, I mean, that has to be on there. It's something that's just, you know, just there's just no other choice. And the other thing I think that we don't often really credit the N64 for too much, because it certainly wasn't the first machine with 4 controller ports, but it was the first Nintendo machine with 4 controller ports, 4-player games, and something like, of course, the very first Super Smash Brothers coming out on the N64 changed the way we did couch co-op. And so I think that's important, and I think it's something that we can't minimize, and how it definitely changed how people played games together.
Okay, awesome. I'm getting Blake is telling me we've got some audio issues. What's I can't hear them, Blake. These guys sound great to me. What does it sound like?
It's just cutting out really bad.
Oh, is it?
I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Is it both guys cutting out?
Yeah.
Okay. They sound great on this. They both sound perfect on here. Are you getting? Yeah, people are commenting on the audio.
Chat, no, we're working on it.
Okay, we're working on the audio, guys. We're working on it. Okay, well, I think all we can do is continue this conversation and see if it's the internet. We're not in control of the internet. We don't know when things are going to stop and start. These guys know. Okay. So I think we should get down to some brass tacks here and figure out what games definitely need to be on the N64. Well, first of all, Shane, are we getting the N64 Classic Edition this year?
You know, we made a video on Rerez talking about what we basically thought would be the next console that they would release in the Classic line, and I think the 64 makes the most sense.
Yeah.
From a space standpoint, every game that you would have on the GameCube would be a lot larger, but at least with the N64, it's a little bit more manageable, and I think Sid knows a little bit more about the space limitations and stuff that you'd be getting with that. And I think that with the N64 Mini, I think it would be a great time for them to go back to those old games, upscale them to 1080p or 720p, whatever resolution, because it's a dynamic resolution. There's no pixel boundaries on it. They could really just bring it up to 1080p so that we could have the first Classic system in true, you know, high definition. I think the best thing that we could hope for is them releasing a system that matches the same size as the SNES Classic and at least has 4 ports at the front. I mean, I would love that because I think it's so important. What Sid talked about with Smash Brothers, it's not just Smash Brothers. It was almost every game that had multiplayer supported 4 players because it was just, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Obviously, it can be a little taxing on the system, but I honestly think there's something they are going to do.
Sid, could they use the same technology, the same chipset that they've been using on the NES Mini and the SNES Mini?
Well, you know, it's a little bit impossible to say whether it has enough horsepower. I think it's maybe a little bit weak, but if you look at how much memory is in the existing one, so we know that, for example, on the NES Classic, we had 30 games. On the Super Nintendo Classic, we only had 21 games. I think a lot of people were like, you know, why is that? Is it because, you know, hey, we're licensing less games or whatever? But a lot of it has to do with space. If you look at how much memory is inside that physical unit, for the average N64 game, you could actually probably only get about 12 games on there, depending on which games they chose. So, for example, Vic, I know if they chose one of your favorites, like Tonic Trouble, I'm being sarcastic here, by the way, in case you don't know. You could fit lots of copies of Tonic Trouble on there. But something like Zelda, it's a 32 meg cartridge, which, I mean, let's face it, technically 32 megabytes for how much that game offers is incredible. But in terms of how much space it takes up on something like that, it's going to be tight if they want to use the same hardware. And if they don't use the same hardware, what does that mean for the retail price? Is it going to go up anymore? So it's hard to say.
Well, if they do what they did with the Super Nintendo, which I think was, Nintendo recognizing that 2-player is the core sort of concept with that console, they need to put 4 controllers in with the N64. So that's going to immediately jack up the price, or they're going to have lots of extra controllers out there. So that would jack up the price, I think, for sure. But let's talk about the games that definitely need to be on there. And I think we have to think 20 is the minimum amount. And that's That's all. That's like 8% or 7% of all of the games that came out for the machine. That's a significant deal right there, right? So Wave Race is one. I'm picking Wave Race.
I think it's important to have that one. Yeah.
I'm also picking Pilot Wings 64. Sid, you want to pick a couple?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna. I mean, obviously we could all talk about the standard ones. We gotta, hopefully have GoldenEye and Conkers. But one that I think that I'd like to see that's probably not on most people's list is Rayman 2.
Yep.
I love this as a 3D platform game. It wasn't, incredible from one standpoint, and it wasn't remembered as a classic on the system. But I think it would be great for people to go back and try this one out and just see what an awesome game it actually was. So that for me would be one. And Vic, I'm going to steal one of yours. Actually, you haven't mentioned it, but I know you will probably bring it up. Is Jet Force Gemini?
Love that game.
That game's got to be on there too if they can manage it. But of course, the problem with this game and a Ubisoft game and whatnot is going to be licensing, right? So they're going to have to deal with other companies. It's going to be a little tough for Nintendo to get those games that, really did build the system for them. Conkers obviously is a big one, but are they going to want to have a Conkers game on a family-friendly system? Probably not.
Right.
It's interesting because we've got Rare did release those games on Rare Replay on the Xbox One X. And we got those games in those high-resolution formats. So we know that kind of code exists already. I don't know if that exact version would work on a classic mini system, but would Nintendo be able to get that license? Like that's so key because Rare was so influential to the N64.
I think Nintendo and Microsoft have a pretty good relationship, honestly. Microsoft has worked with Nintendo on projects in the past, and we've seen things like Rocket League, cross compatibility. They're within spitting distance of each other in Redmond. I think that they would work together, and I think that would be a nice olive branch for any bad blood that may have continued to exist after the sale of Rare to Microsoft. Because obviously Microsoft is fully aware of the importance of that range of software that came out from that company for this specific platform. And when I look at the N64, I get good feelings about Rare, in a massive way. Like Diddy Kong Racing is one that I think definitely has to be on the machine, and it's one of the most underrated kart racing games of all time, I think. It's one of the best, and I don't think people give this game enough credit. It had a story, it had fantastic multiplayer, amazing soundtrack, great sense of humor, incredible game. So I've laid down 3. Sid's laid down two or three. What games would you like to see there, Shane?
Boy, so there's a lot of racing games out there. There's Mario Kart and all that stuff. Beetle Adventure Racing is one. I think Sid has a copy that he's going to.
Got it right here. Look at this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now that game is Electronic Arts, and that game was so fun, but I think a lot of people thought it was just a gimmicky game or a bad game that they just threw away, but it was actually really fun and enjoyable, and I think it surpasses what you would expect from a game like that because they weren't going for that whole Need for Speed type gameplay or more realistic gameplay. It's really bizarre and strange and has a lot of strange level design, but it's just a really knockout experience, and I think it's something that's worth seeing again.
Absolutely. It almost could be, there could almost be like a racing subsection on the N64 Mini, right? There's so many good racing karts, and I've got a couple here too, like 1080 snowboarding was pretty damn incredible, and they never could quite replicate this. They couldn't replicate this, and they couldn't replicate Wave Race any other time they tried to connect with those. F-Zero X was a great N64 game. The San Francisco Rush game, or the Rush games, there was Rush 2049 and San Francisco Rush. Those would be incredible. I don't think that they're going to do Conker's Bad Fur Day, and it's specifically for what you mentioned, Sid. I don't think they would try to, if they want this console in Bed Bath and Beyond and stuff like that, they're not going to want to put an M-rated game where your cute character, no poo song with little corn teeth. But I think Smash is definitely on that sucker. I think Blast Corps. You guys remember this one?
Yeah.
Yep.
This was a
Yeah,
pretty damn cool
that's a
game.
good
It's
one.
I've got a $6.95 price tag on there. I think we bought this secondhand, but this game was amazing. It was you had to like basically navigate a nuclear bomb through cities and things without blowing up. Kind of dark subject matter in 2018, but
Yeah.
Really.
you had to do that. How about the Rogue Squadron games?
The Factor
Oh,
5 stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those would be awesome for sure, and especially with Star Wars being sort of, well, it's continued to be such a loved franchise. That would be great if they could get that on there for sure.
Yeah.
I would love to see. Speaking of Factor 5, I would love to see Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine.
Yes.
And that what I love about this, and this is quintessential Nintendo 64 stuff. Sid's got a box of that and that one's hard to come by.
Yep.
So you don't
Especially in
get
the box.
Yeah,
The box is
only
tough.
sold
Well, it was the only way you could actually get this game was it was the rental at Blockbuster, so that's why so many boxes got destroyed.
Oh wow.
Because if people, and actually I had to obtain mine by buying the box from Blockbuster and the game from a video store. The only other way you could get this game was through the LucasArts website. So it was either Blockbuster or directly from LucasArts, and so that's why of this are really, really tough to find these days. So that's a tough one.
And you think because of that, it's got to be not a great version of the game because it's N64. That may be the best version of that game that exists due to increased texture quality, model work, better gameplay and performance. Like they worked really hard on making the Nintendo 64 version such a great thing, and then they just didn't release it in stores for people to buy,
it's like the
makes
story.
No sense.
It makes me so upset. Indiana Jones has been so squandered in video games. It's crazy. We did this huge story in Electric Playground, and I got dressed up as Indy, and I sort of had to I had to get into LucasArts to steal the cartridge and run away, and got chased by the developers. I had a blast with that game. And you're right, Shane. I would love to see Indiana. I don't think it will be there though. This will be another time where it's like, yeah. Screw Indiana Jones. We're not going to put him in there. I have Yoshi's Story up on the desk, and I think that should be up there. I've got other titles. Of course, we're going to see Star Fox 64. Of course, we're going to see... are we going to see GoldenEye? You'd think that's a no-brainer, but would we see GoldenEye on this?
That's hard because it's so many hands are in that pot, and you don't know who's going to be able to say yes. Or if one person says yes, they probably all want it on everything. So
right, and Pierce Brosnan gets a paycheck if that's on that thing, right?
Right.
I think it's all about money for that one. I think that one's going to be really tough for sure. Now, what do you guys think about, like, on the SNES Classic we had Earthbound, which I know for me as a collector was one of those titles that was very, very expensive. Like if you have it complete in box, it's worth a lot of money.
Yep.
It came out now, all of a sudden the value of the loose cartridge has gone down tremendously. Although interestingly, the complete in box price has continued to rise with that game. But what about if we had something like Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut? I just checked the prices on this one.
Wow.
Right now, a boxed copy of this, similar situation, rental only copy at Blockbuster. In the box, complete, you're looking at around $2,000 US for this game.
Holy
This
crap.
is the most expensive N64 game there is. Now, what happens if this gets released on a compilation like this? Does it devalue the loose cartridge? Probably. Does it affect the complete in box? I don't know. But is that going to happen?
I don't think that.
That's what I'm wondering.
I mean, Interplay is the publisher on that one, and I think that the rights around Clay Fighter are probably incredibly messy.
Yeah.
And I think because Nintendo, it was a success, the N64, and they had just enough games, and they had just enough excellent games that a lot of players wanted that machine and got that machine. We all think of it fondly. Probably our whole chat is it is lighting up right now with lots of great thoughts about N64 software, and we'll get to some of that in the chat at the end of the show, by the way. But I don't know if it sort of resonated into the mainstream like the N64 or like the SNES did and the NES especially did, but I think they're going to probably try to pick the safe choices, the ones that they know are 9 or 10 out of 10. You know, almost every single one of those games.
I
Now,
feel like anything
Nintendo. Go ahead, Shane.
that
Go ahead.
I think that anyone that or any game that they could possibly pick, mostly I think they're gonna go from their first catalog stuff. So Pokemon Snap,
Yep.
Pilot Wings, things that they had a big hand in making, and they're probably very proud of, and they want to show that off. Plus, it's a lot cheaper for them.
Yeah.
But there are some like those classic ones. Everyone likes Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie
Yep.
and Mischief Makers and
Donkey Kong
games from other
64.
companies. Yeah, and I think those are some. The N64 is a very interesting console, not because Nintendo made it work, but because other companies were just as successful on that system as Nintendo was.
Well,
It's a
and
very
Rare
interesting thing.
specifically, like they can't release this thing. I don't think they could do it without Rare. Like if they went and said, "Look, we're going to make this, but none of the Rare games are going to be on there," that would really piss a lot of people off, I think.
I think it would. I feel that if they were to try this, and they need to have some kind of killer app. With the Super Nintendo Classic, they had Star Fox 2, which was amazing to see. Just to know that they actually had that to bring it out, to show it off
Yes.
for the very first time. For this, I think the killer thing they could do is to take the 64DD, and that's the disc drive that they had in Japan, and release some games that were on there. So, for instance, for F-Zero had expanded tracks that were only available on 64DD. If we could get those,
That's amazing.
in here, that would make it give you a good reason to get that. There was also the original Animal Crossing. Animal Crossing was originally on a 64DD.
Right.
And
Before
I
it
think
came to
there
GameCube.
was- yeah. Or maybe it was just an N64, but I'm pretty sure there's other 64DD stuff like that too. But there's there's like a weird golfing game on the 64DD. There's a SimCity 64 was released only on the DD.
Oh wow.
And then there's 2 or 3 Mario Paint style games on 64DD. And all those things never came to North America or Japan or outside of Japan. And those I think would be a really cool thing to see.
Let's talk about this thing. Now, this was a revolutionary controller in its time because, of course, we'd only had to think about 2D navigation before Mario 64, and this had an analog stick, and I remember being at those E3s and the demonstrations of Mario going from a little saunter to like a full-on run, depending on how hard you press the analog stick, changed everything, and that game changed everything, and we know that. But this doesn't feel the same as it did in 1996. What do you think players are going to think about the N64 controller in 2018 if we get it this year?
Please let me put my Wavebird into the N64 Classic. Whatever you do, whatever you do.
Yes.
I don't know. I couldn't. I don't think I could go back and play. Once I started playing Zelda on the GameCube and using that version with the Wavebird, I couldn't go back. I was like, I found it so hard to use that original controller, and they break so easily. I mean, at the very least, they're going to have to redesign them to be more sturdy and just more reliable.
Was there a Nintendo first party? I can't remember. Was there a Nintendo first party wireless thing for the N64?
No.
So this was the only. There probably were wireless devices, but this was the only way that Nintendo had you playing the game, and they had the Rumble Pack thing in the bottom, and you could pop in.
Oh, you could have that thing weigh 8 pounds if you put in the Rumble Pack and put in the save thing, and like it just got ridiculous. You'd be using it, and the controller would be on the ground.
It is.
It was awful.
It's almost like Aquaman's trident a little bit right here, but I'm actually looking forward to the videos of young players getting their hands on this thing for the first time. That's going to be crazy.
I think
that's pretty bad.
I think they would have to use a more modern analog stick, like the stuff we have on the GameCube or on a modern Xbox controller.
Right.
Something like that being in a replacement of that. Because what they had there originally, it was there was little like LED readers, whatever. It was like a little light sensor. And when the plastic rubbed off on that, because eventually it did, it got stuck in there. And that's what made the controller so poor to use over time.
Right.
So now we have way better technology. Just put that in there.
Yeah.
And we don't, because it's all software based and we're emulating these games, we don't need to actually have memory card slots available in the controller. It can be in the system, but I think the rumble feature should be built in. So instead of the controller having a clip out part, it's clipped in already, it's sealed, it's one solid mold, and then from there you still get that same experience and feel of it. So
I think we are describing, with the bigger, beefier games, if they do add any stuff that wasn't released, like 64DD stuff, and Sid, I want to hear from you in a second here about the best and hardest to find N64 games. But if they add these big games that were big in size and also in stature and importance to the games industry, they add this complicated 3D controller and more than one of them, and the memory and horsepower to run all of this stuff, I think it's going to be substantially more expensive than what we saw with the NES and the SNES. It could be twice as much. Do you think people would go for that?
I don't think they'd go for it if it's twice as much. But I mean, it's almost like, the and we're going to talk on Canadian prices here, but we go from the sort of the $79.99 of the original NES Classic with one controller. Now we jump to $99 for the SNES Classic with two controllers. Do they make the jump to $129 and come with two controllers again for the N64? That I could see maybe somebody going for. You're now getting into the price of 2DS, 3D, low end 3DS, that kind of thing. Yeah. So maybe that's okay, and maybe that would be about $99 US. You get much beyond that. I think it's going to be hard for people to swallow. And then you add on that the possibility of, quantities being low and scalpers coming in again and all this kind of stuff all over again. This thing's going to be $500. Like it's going to be just crazy. You might as well just, go and try and find one at a pawn shop or something like that and get an original. But I think the price might be higher. It worries me a little bit, but at the same time, I think Vic, you were to your point about the fact that one of the things that's great about this rediscovering these classics for people that are not us, because we have to remember we're a little different, right? Because video games are pretty much our lives. Yep. But for the average person to go back in time and be able to take a system and do something with it, they're going to want to do it with the two players, I think, and I think that's important. And there are so many games that were great multiplayer. Like Shane, you were saying, it's more than just Smash Brothers. I mean, things like games that people could discover, like Gauntlet Legends, being able to play 4 players in any Gauntlet game, absolutely amazing. So that's going to be important. So by the time you add 4 controllers, now you're probably going to be $200. So it's going to be pretty expensive. It's going to be a major purchase.
Which they could just add all of these games to the Switch and make everybody happy. That's probably why we're not getting these things as quickly and as big of a quantity as we all want them to, because Nintendo is counting the numbers and sort of doing the full analysis of this. Sid, what game did most people not pick up or was very difficult to get, but was really good and is considered an N64 must-have or classic?
Well, if you're into the RPG scene, then you're going to want to try to get Ogre Battle 64.
Cool.
This is a good game, has become very expensive. And of course, when you look at the success of things like Stardew Valley today on the Switch and things like that, games like Harvest Moon 64. This is when the franchise did start on the Super Nintendo, but still a lot of people, even when it got to the 64, hadn't gone into this kind of game that's more accessible. And this sort of thing, and I hate to say this, but I think this kind of game actually became popular with things like Facebook. Yeah. This style of game, and people are like, you know what, this is pretty cool. And I think that's what has sort of made the price of these kind of things go up, because they didn't sell as well as maybe they would have today, where people understand that this kind of game is a lot of fun and also appeals to a different demographic than the average game. It's not a shooter game, and so it does appeal to a different subset of people. So those are a couple of games I think that would be great to be on there if they could be, because they're definitely missed by a lot of players the first time around.
That's a great point right there. So I'm thinking we have an N64 Classic Mini that has like a racing subsection with things like the Rush games and Cruisin' maybe, and Beetle Adventure Racing. F-Zero, Mario Kart. There's going to be a substantial amount of cool racers, even Star Wars racers. And in fact, I think you could also have a Star Wars subsection of,
Yeah.
you know, Shadows of the Empire, the Rogue Squadron games, the Star Wars racers, the Battle for Naboo. Or there was tons of good little Star Wars games on this thing. And then you get your 3D action adventure games, the Zeldas and the Marios, and maybe a Rare section, you know, which is focused just on the stuff that Rare had. That sounds amazing. I really want it, but I'm talking with you guys and I'm recognizing the hurdles, man. Now it's not so clear that this thing is actually going to happen.
It's interesting because there are games on the Nintendo 64 that version exists, and it's not like any other version, like Doom 64.
Yeah,
Doom 64 is basically the sequel to Doom 2, but it's the only version of that game that exists, and it's darker and it's moodier and it's got a much, I think, scarier feel to it. And I think, like you were mentioning earlier, both of you guys are just saying I don't think they want to go to that darker place, but you know, Resident Evil 2 is on the system, exists only in the way it does in that system, and it's impossible that game is on there, but they managed to get it on there with all the cutscenes, and that's the kind of stuff that the Nintendo 64 surpassed expectations with, because you just didn't expect those kind of games to be on there or to be in the way that they were there. So
every week I was fighting with Tommy about how much I love the N64, and he was all PlayStation all the time, and to my eyes I liked a lot of the look of the N64 stuff better than the PlayStation stuff. It was a great era in games, though. There was a lot of really cool creativity. Another franchise that I think really sprang to life on the N64 was Turok, when Acclaim was a big video game company back in the day. This was an awesome conversation. I know that everybody on the chat and everybody that's watching this right now is thinking fondly back to the N64 days, and who knows if we're going to get that announcement this year, but I think we'll all have our radar dishes on. I know one thing, though, I'm going to have both of you guys back on for various things if you'd like to come back, but I really appreciate you both taking the time to be here with us today, and have an awesome day, and go play something that's on a Nintendo platform.
Sounds good.
All right, you guys, take it easy, and we'll see you very soon. But right now, we've got to take a look at a brand new buried treasure.